This is the Empowering Healthy Business Podcast, and I'm your host, Cal Wilder. Each episode, we'll dive into topics important to folks who want to run businesses that are both nicely profitable, sustainable, and scalable, and who want to achieve balance in their lives and realize their potential inside and outside of work. This show is sponsored by SmartBooks, provider of bookkeeping and accounting for businesses. Let's get started. Welcome. I think today's episode is going to be a very interesting one, and I'm not sure where all it will go. I was introduced to today's guest related to potentially coming on my second podcast, the Marketing Agency Power Hour. And then I quickly realized there's a much larger story here to tell than just, what his current marketing agency is doing. I think we'll find some similarities with episode number 30, which was Overcoming Blind Spots of Visionary Founders Trying to Scale a Business with Becky Venuti of BB Coaching. Shout out, Becky. But I think we'll see how today's guest does that to accelerate the growth of specific kinds of clients. So without further ado, Jami Mullikin, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Cal. Thank you for having me. Excited to have this conversation.
Yeah. So maybe I'll start by asking you, you founded multiple companies, multiple agencies over the years. You've your current one, you started on EOS from day one, I understand. And prior,
Correct.
You probably didn't use EOS, so maybe you implemented it midway through. So I'm curious, what's it been like to, start on EOS and run on EOS versus not?
Yeah, so that's it's a fun conversation to have, right? I think one of the core tenets of EOS is you're just harnessing the energy of people, right? Getting everybody rowing in the right direction. And agencies are their own unique complexity because we're the land of corporate misfits. You have the entrepreneurialism and the creativity and all that kind of coming together, and it's all deadline driven. It's very dynamic. So I think agencies themselves can be a place internally that can seem chaotic, many, if not most of the time. And so being, starting an agency young and really learning business and entrepreneurship and all that at the same time, I had some success in my earlier years growing agencies and did that. It was fun, but it was chaos, and I did that for about 12 years before then going client side and being in marketing leadership for two different organizations for about a decade. And then really had that, what I didn't know now was a visionary itch, had that itch to be like, I'm doing something helping other people build their vision, but I wanted to do it on my own again. So kind of my introduction to EOS was I had jumped out to start a consulting company and left a position at a good size systems integrator, software systems integrator, where I was running marketing and sales, and wanted to start my own consultancy. And sat down with a friend of mine, Adam Landrum, like on day 2 of my first week on my own. Like the only thing I had done was quit my job and printed a business card, and started networking and met with Adam. And he was running an agency for about 20 years. He was an accountant. And by background, who just at the .com boom started playing with websites.
That's an unusual combination right there.
Correct. Yeah. So he was an accountant who started building tools in the early .com era, websites for people, that then became a full-blown agency 20 years later. And he listened to what I said that morning at breakfast, and he was like, I hear you, but don't do that. I was like, why? He was like, I'm an accountant. I own an agency. It's been 20 years. I'm exhausted. I'm doing this thing called EOS. And will you come and be my integrator? And so he gave me a copy of Get a Grip. And that was my introduction to EOS, was really reading that book. I'd never heard of it before that day. And over, 5 days reading the book, talking and negotiating, that next Monday I started as his integrator. So that was my intro to EOS. I'll hold that part of the story for down the road. But so that was 3 years. That was the COVID chapter. And then had the opportunity to do something on my own again when after COVID had kind of lifted, and decided to jump out, not start an agency again, do some consulting. And that consulting led us to where we are today, which is Wonder. And when it was getting very clear that I was going to start and build another agency, then I just committed. I hired our EOS implementer And I hired my integrator, my co-founder and I, Mark, hired an integrator. So there were three of us. And we sat down 10 days after he started and did our focus day for EOS. So we literally ground, at the very beginning, started with our implementer doing a formal EOS implementation. And that's been about 20 months ago.
Cool. And so for those listening who are not familiar with EOS, it's really a business operating system with a very structured set of you know organizational structure and meeting cadences and things like that. How would you describe it, Jamie?
Yeah, I mean it is a framework, and what there is a lot of people, what is this thing? Is it software? Is it a bunch of bureaucracy? Like I'm an entrepreneur, I don't want all those rules, and it's actually a framework that gives entrepreneurs freedom. It really does help you focus on the right things, align your team in the right direction. Every community has some unity. Every culture has a little cult. So really, it helps a team focus on a common good, which is whatever the vision of that organization is. And then it gives you the language, right, to allow everybody to know how to speak and manage and communicate well, and it aligns goals to that vision. So it has a really strong accountability framework or accountability component to the framework that really just removes drama, lets you be objective, have a vision, have a clear plan, let everybody come to their seat and on the bus and know where the bus is headed and just do their job really well as a team.
Right. So there's components. There's instead of a traditional org chart, you have the accountability chart where it's
Right.
focused on the outcomes that each role is responsible for, not like the job description of what you do, right? And then you have a structured weekly leadership team meeting. And then you have structured quarterly meetings and annual planning. But it all starts, like you said, with focus day, right?
Correct. Yeah, and then what it gives you is it gives your organization a pulse. It gives you a rhythm. It gives you predictability to allow, like for us, the energy and chaos that we thrive in
Yeah.
as an agency. Like, but it does give us a heartbeat, right? We can still get our cardio workout in because we got so much going on, but it gives you just it sets aside the time, gives people the language to allot, depending on what team you're on, 90 minutes a week to work on the business instead of in it.
And there's
So
a whole
now,
set of tools that instead of having to go figure out how to do, performance reviews, which, annual performance reviews are painful for everybody involved usually and not really that helpful. But so they have different tools. So you don't have to figure out how to do a performance review, how to figure out, do all the employees know the vision and values of the business? And so instead of having to reinvent 20 different tools or whatever, EOS gives them to you. So you spend your time executing and driving the business, not trying to figure out how to manage the business.
yeah, absolutely. It just gives you those language, those tools, and the number one, tenet is simplicity, right? So fighting complexity with simplicity is what the framework's intended to do. And taking like employee reviews or even hiring, that's challenging, right? There's everybody has their different way of doing it. There's some formal, some informal, but really the on the people component of EOS is GWC. Does the person in this role get it? Do they want it? Do they have the capacity to do it? And when you pair their roles and responsibilities with just the yes and no, if there's no maybe, is do they get it? Yes or no? Do they want it? Do they have capacity to do it? But you're doing it in the however many of the 5 or 6 key roles that are in their function. And then you align that with core values. And then you do that quarterly, and it just makes, that mitigates surprises, gives you a structure to a framework, lets employees know when those conversations happen. And you obviously have multiple times with L10s and other places to, work through issues and challenges. But it just really gives good, clear communication and
Right.
expectations.
And, provides a scorecard, kind of forces, like, measuring what matters on a weekly basis and rolling
Yeah.
it up toward quarterly objectives. So it is
Yeah.
kind of binary, yes or no, which is one knock on it compared to other frameworks because it's hard to say always is it yes or no. Sometimes it is kind of half or maybe. And some
But
people, yeah,
it still gives you the conversation.
yeah,
That's the thing, is it gives you the conversation and the language to at least say like, hey, we can use this tool, we can look at it. And there's ways to do it. Like, EOS doesn't provide leadership, doesn't provide people, right? It just provides the frameworks that are very simple and easy to follow. So you can bring your personal style and, background and dialogue and everything into that.
yeah, cool. And then the other kind of knock I've heard is, and I experienced it some, I'd overcome that to some extent when I was running on EOS, which is it's kind of light on strategy. It's got those three uniques, but unless you really dive in and kind of look at that in term, like we ended up using, uh, it's written by the CEO of Procter Gamble. It's about it has strategy maps in it. I don't know. It kind of forced us to decide what we wanted to be good at, who we were going to sell to, things like that. And
Yeah.
ultimately, it can come up with three uniques. But I feel like sometimes you need a little more of a structured way to figure out your strategy too.
Yeah, when you talk about what makes you different, what's your niche and what's your target market, that's the three simple lines on what's called the VTO, which is the Vision Direction Organizer.
Yeah,
Um, and really, what that does is at least gets everybody aligned on what we're not going to go do, right?
yeah,
Because it does narrow it down and just say, okay, here's what we do and for whom,
yeah.
and here's what makes us different. Here's what we do and for whom. So it's very simple, but yeah, it doesn't give you a marketing strategy or a plan to say like, now what do we do? We have time and dollars to invest to build a pipeline to drive
Yeah.
revenue. It doesn't give you that, and which is actually why we founded Wonder, is because that's a very natural stage for a company to have a vision. Have once they get a clear vision, usually they realize, wow, we've got this internally, we've got alignment. And our messaging no longer aligns with what this target market is or what makes us different. So as an agency, that's where we come in and work with brands that run on EOS, because we can take that VTO and actually help them build a brand strategy that's true for who they are today, but who they want to be in a decade when they're trying to hit that 10-year target.
Right. So the way you described kind of internal culture at agencies, I'm curious how hard it is and how often it succeeds implementing such a structured system such as EOS, and how much resistance there is, and how do you overcome that natural resistance to imposing structure or embracing
I
structure.
mean, I will say most likely, like, so I am a creative by background. I'm started as in the graphic design side of advertising, and I am all things that come with that crazy creative agency leader. I enjoy new stuff. I love working with clients. Love working through the work and keeping everything moving. But I don't do the same thing twice ever, right? So I'm just not a super structured person. On Strength Finders, my number 34 is discipline. So, you know, for me, and I know tons of agencies that now run on it. So, I think it has gotten very common, um, because what makes our business complicated is we're not, say, a civil engineering firm where everybody's engineers, right? We're not a single discipline agency. You've got a small team, many small agencies, 12 to 20 people, even 12 to 30 people, don't have full departments with managers, because you've got developers and media people and SEO people and writers and designers and all these different skill sets that are just hard to manage. And we do custom work, right? No client comes to us and says, I want the templates of what you did for your other client for us, right? So helping meet clients where they are, understand what their unique needs are, and then doing the work for them. Everything is custom with a mixed discipline team, and that just makes things hard. You can't really create an assembly line for agencies that are full service. You can if you're just going to do one thing and that's your niche, but we choose to be full service. So it just gets hard, and I think that EOS for agencies like ourselves find some freedom and letting EOS bring that rhythm to where we can each week talk about the challenges, the things that are blocking us from getting our work done, right? Those are called issues. So each week we now have the platform in every department to say, here's the issues I'm having. Those get surfaced up, teams solve problems, and then they check those off and they're done, right? You go to the next week. So I think that for me, I was starving for it. I always knew that I love being inside the agency business. But one of the reasons I did want to do it again is because it's exhausting. The energy it took me to 26 to start an agency, I didn't have that energy at 52 when I started Wonder. And I didn't realize that until we started it again. So EOS just really gives you that freedom. It removes a lot of that drama and friction and frustration and lets people do what they want to do. And for creative people, one of the most important things about creativity is constraints, right? If I say go be creative and I give you no assignment, some people may struggle, but once you put kind of the banks on the river, the water starts flowing, right? And I think that's what EOS brings to an agency is it's the banks to the river, so we can still flow, have energy, and do what we do, but it just really gives you that structure that you need.
Yeah, it kind of gives you the guardrails. Like you still have to go do your creative client work, but you know what scorecard metrics you're accountable for
Correct.
delivering every week. And so no matter what you need to do for clients and projects, this is what kind of the numbers need to be every week.
Well, that's a great example. That's something I resisted. I in not selling time, right? That's something being on the agency side for 25 years. We've never sold time. We've never been like, this is going to take 12 hours at X amount and that's it. We've always done fixed bid work. And what you want to do is hire premium fixed bid work.
Yeah.
But I resisted timesheets as a scorecard metrics for over a year because that it's one of the most punitive things I think is timesheets. Because if you give me if the goal is 80% utilization, which means I got to bill 32 hours this week, and you give me 40 hours worth of work and I do it in 20, I'm now in trouble for only tracking 20 hours of my time, right? But it's like, no, I did 100% of my work in half the time that you gave me. So then you have to have a culture that says, all right, well, I got this done, raise my hand. I've got 12 more hours to get my utilization. Keep giving me more
Yeah.
work, right?
Right. And the more
But
productive you are, the more money you can make. Everybody,
right,
the business makes more money. You have the opportunity to make more
but
money.
it keeps going up. So
Yeah.
that if your metric is your time, you're at the mercy of good planning, and the people who are planning are at the good mercy of good sales, right? So it is, to me, it's a very artificial metric that can be used as a weapon and usually is. So I resisted it, and then last Q4 we actually said, all right, we couldn't figure out the metric for the creative team
Yeah.
because it's very little within their control, and you could be like, well, missing deadlines. Did we miss any deadlines? Did we do any rework? But really those now are, to me, are putting in a bunch of processes for stuff that's only a process because we now have a metric. It's not like the metric is a leading indicator, it's a lagging indicator. So we put out a, a scorecard metric that says our creative team has to bill 32 hours a week on average, rolling over 12 weeks. So if 1 week's down, it doesn't matter. If you take a vacation, it doesn't matter. But in 12 weeks, it's got to be that, at that 32, that 80% utilization.
Yeah.
And I actually found that my team liked it. Like I was the one who didn't want to give it to them. I was like, this is a weapon. Don't do it. And I finally gave in. And now there's rhythm in it. And it's become part of, like, this week, as an example, in our Monday L10 for the creative team, one of my creatives billed 57 hours last week, right? Like that's from a
You look at that and you're like, well, was he productive or was that a problem because he was unproductive?
well, the thing is he was super productive, but it's because out of his control, he was slated to do some work. And then new urgent client work came in, right? And then so that had to move in front of that, which then pressed him to have to binge work all weekend.
Mm.
So if you were like looking at hours, it's like great, but you have to look at the context and go, it's pretty unfair situation.
Yeah. I mean, I'll share my 2 cents on utilization. My first cent is, well, I guess I have three. My first cent is if you're in a professional services business like an agency, most of your cost is your payroll and your people's time. It's like you're blind if you don't have visibility into their utilization, right? So that's my
Correct.
first thought. My second thought is, you got to avoid weaponizing it, like you said. Like you have a scorecard, there can't be, um, there needs to be a balanced set of metrics in there. So you can measure utilization, but then you might want to know what's the effective hourly rate of those hours. So you may want to say, okay, I want to make sure I'm getting $150 an hour for the work. So if I log, 15 more hours than I'm really supposed to, then that's going to kill my effective hourly rate. And so it kind
Right.
of balances and give you some insight as to manager what's going on.
Yeah.
And then I guess my third cent is, um, well, I guess that was my third cent. You gotta have another metric on the scorecard to balance it out. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. But no, I think for us in doing it in 12 weeks, it's worked out to where it's like, hey, you can take, you know, a Friday off, and as long as we're getting that week stuff done. But then, you're going to have to make some time up there because we're a small team. So if you take 2 days off, we're shifting your work to someone else who's picking it up most likely.
yeah,
And so just having that balance and that expectation, and pulling it out to a longer view, versus like at a day, it's like, you had 8 hours of work, you only build 2.5. It's like that's very micromanaging from my perspective. It's like pull that back out and look at a longer window.
yeah, yeah. I mean, what happened in a week could be interesting, but it might not be
Yeah,
good or bad. It
yeah,
may be
yeah.
interesting.
But I say that, going back 20 years ago, running an agency with timesheets, that was timesheets were the issue. It wasn't a scorecard metric. Everything was about job profitability and tracking times every week, turning in your timesheet. I worked at an agency that paid us $20 on Fridays if we would just turn our timesheets in. That is actually not accountability, right? You don't have to pay someone to do the job I mean, that's part of your job anyway. You don't pay someone to do what a basic expectation
Yeah.
is. So just agencies have always struggled to find ways to do it.
So let me ask you. I'm putting you in the spot a little bit here, but like before EOS, when you were running agencies without EOS, what were like the top three big challenges or problems that you faced that are now solved by EOS? Or like, what are the top ones that you've had to deal with that get solved now by EOS?
I mean, so like I going back and looking back, I mean, pipeline and workload and the pulse and of the agencies, the feast and famine of the agencies, right? Like you get a bunch of work in, and now everybody's focused on work and no one's looking up to what's on the other side of this, right? And so I would say everything was a lagging indicator, right? We're reporting on the work that we did last week. There were very few things talking about the future. And I think that when you take each department, in an organization, usually you've got so a visionary operations that's in the US called the VI relationship, visionary and integrator. Then you got sales, marketing, operations, and finance. That's kind of the five seats in a very simple business.
Yep.
But then you split some, like we split, well, not here, but sales and marketing can be split apart. Operations, account service and creative direction, two totally different functions, right? So it doesn't make sense for those two to report into each other. So you get multiple seats on the leadership team, but the accountability chart says who's responsible for what. And then the core processes, which is how do you break the whole business down into the 8 or 12 processes that run everything? Like you get that figured out. And then each of those 8 or 12 processes belongs to someone on that accountability chart. So now you have full leading indicator metrics across each department,
Right.
right? Being able for us every Monday to go on the sales side, how many leads came in last week, right? How many opportunities, what's the value of the opportunities that we created in the past 7 days? What's the value of the pipeline that we have for this quarter, and this quarter's coming to an end because we're at the end of March. So, all right, what's the next quarter looking like? Like having those at a leadership level every week across all departments just keeps everybody focused on kind of heads up versus once we leave that L10 meeting, we're heads down again, getting all the work done.
Right. And I think the good integrators force those leading indicators to get defined because
Yeah.
there's a tendency to, you know, avoid certain accountability. So whoever's responsible for sales and marketing, you could measure them on how many deals they closed last week or month to date, but that's just lagging. You want to know how many calls they made, how many meetings they had, how many proposals they presented, things like that each week, which are based on just effort, not so much. There's some luck and in the right place, the right time determines, who's going to sign for how much money each week. But, effort determines how many calls you made, and,
Correct.
just some effort with some luck determines how many proposals you present and things like that.
Yeah, I've always, since running a sales team, pipeline created. That's my weekly metric. Like in the past week, since last time we met, how much new pipeline has been created?
Yeah.
Because that is it's lagging, metric of last week's behavior. It's a leading metric of future sales pipeline, right?
Right.
And then like just issue resolution. Like one of the issues for us um, probably last June was we were short staffed on the account service side, and we were hiring, but we were just understaffed. And so I was just telling clients like, look, your work's getting done. I just don't have time to tell you that. So clients were emailing, like, what's the update on this? What's the update on this? So we actually put the primary scorecard metric for our account service team is how many times did clients email us last week asking for an update on something? And the scorecard is 0. That's the goal. But once we put that metric on, and it was like 6, and then it went to 4. Now it's 0, 0, 0, and if it's a 1, we're talking about it. But just that idea of what gets measured matters, or I forget the saying around it. But just knowing that that's a recurring issue that we're having, so let's just make it visible every week and let's solve it.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, you know, once each seat in the accountability seat gets, their top metrics figured out, then you have the exercise of figuring out, okay, what's the short list of top company metrics, and then making sure you
Right.
incorporate, because you can't just, if each seat has 5 metrics each week, you can't roll it up to like 25 metrics at the company level. It's just too much. So then you have to really prioritize, what is the senior leadership team going to be really focused on every week versus what is each department going to be focused on every week.
Yeah, when we first rolled out EOS, and so I was at an agency called Up and Up at the time, and we worked with an EOS implementer named Charlie White. And the way he talked about the scorecard is, if you, so Jamie, so I'm the visionary, right? I'm leader of the organization on the accountability chart. So Jamie, you're in the Dominican Republic on vacation with your wife. It's Friday afternoon. You're flying out Saturday morning. Someone from the resort comes out and says, Mr. and Mrs. Mullikin, you've been such an amazing guest. If you would like, we will give you the next week, as a comp to your stay, you could stay another week. And so your scorecard needs to be the 6 to 8 things that could be written on a napkin with no context that you could look at and be like, what's the health of my business after being gone a week? And can I look forward and know that I could be gone another week? Like it look just what are those handful of things? And then once you get that set from the visionary's perspective, then you do it as a leadership team.
Yeah.
And then once the leadership team does it, then they can back up and they can do it at their department, right? And then you want to go all the way down to every person having a number. That's not meant to dehumanize or it's just an accountability thing. Every person in the organization has a metric. And what should happen naturally is that metric rolls all the way up to where I'm an individual contributor and I can see how that supports those upper metrics of the organization that would be on that napkin for those 6 or 8 things.
Right, right. So this all sounds awesome, but how does it work if you've got a 5-person agency and you're trying to fill 8 seats in an accountability chart, and people can only do so much.
Correct. So that's the complexity of EOS, which is why EOS, they say this is for entrepreneurial operating system is for entrepreneurial organizations. They either were or are still have an entrepreneurial spirit, and but 10 to 250 employees, and that's what they would say. The principles can be applied anywhere, but it takes 10 or more to start having an accountability chart. That's not for us, a 10-person organization with 23 roles and everybody's wearing all the different hats.
Yeah.
And then the inverse of that is there comes a point where you get too large and you become a matrix organization with not a single vision, and that's probably where you start to lose that entrepreneurial component. And so that's why they say over 250 is kind of an if. But I am a firm believer, especially for not if you're a solopreneur and you plan to stay that way, then there's some really good discipline in there with scorecards. Like when I started just as me all over again, I sat down my first Monday and built my scorecard and held myself accountable to the activities I needed to do to generate revenue, right, each week. But the scorecard, the rhythm, the casting a vision, the VTO, all that is applicable to a one person company. It's just the accountability chart, the leadership as you add two, three, four, five people. It's hard, and I think most, I don't know this for a fact. It's hard that almost if they said we're for anyone, you'd have a lot of people with 10 people or less saying EOS sucks, it doesn't work, it's broken,
Yeah.
and it really because you just don't have the scale. The other thing is EOS is not a fix it tool. It's not a product market fit tool, right? So it's built for organizations that already have product market fit, that already have revenue supporting them at 10 people or more. And I think that's a defining thing too. It doesn't help you. It's assuming you have a good business and you want to be great. It's not a turnaround tool or like, hey, if we don't do EOS, we're going to close our doors.
Yeah.
It's not a leadership tool. It's not a product market fit tool. It's meant for organizations that want to cast vision, get traction, and be healthy.
Cool. I was thinking, I'm trying to remember that book and tool framework that was helpful in figuring out strategy that would result in the three uniques. And the name of the book is Playing to Win by, I can't see it.
I was looking. I know I have seen it. I don't
To
haven't read it.
Win author A.G. Lafley, longtime
Okay.
CEO of Procter & Gamble. Yeah. So if anybody needs some help figuring out strategy to feed into the VTO, I would really highly recommend the book Playing to Win. And there's a tool in there that helps you figure out target market and, what you're better than the competition and for that target market and why it matters to that target market and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
Cool. So, and I don't know, we could talk one more question for EOS. Then I want to understand more what you're doing at Wonder and get into like your life story a little bit, because that's very interesting too. But another challenge I've seen is with, when a, 12-person company or 15-person company implements EOS, or somebody less than 10 implements it, even though it's not really intended for less than 10, they kind of put people in seats, and it's called senior leadership team. But these people are not really senior leaders. They're individual contributors. They just happen to work in a small business.
Yeah.
And then the business grows and it's now 20, 25 people. And what was good enough when you were 12 kind of is subpar when you're 25,
Right.
but you've got these people you really like who've been with you for a few years. And it's, removing them from the senior leadership team is tough, but you can't end up with people on the senior leadership team at that point who are not really senior leader caliber. So how do you
Yes.
navigate that?
Yeah. So I think the right people, right seat is one of the people components. And I had, are we on the right bus, right? So you got the bus going in a direction
Yeah.
across that bus. So that's your VTO. It's like, here's the vision. This is where this bus is headed. You want to get on the bus, you got to align with the core values, right? Those core values are the rules to the game. Like these are the things that we hold true. Core values can't be pressed too far. So that's why honesty and integrity are the two that you'll see on most corporate walls, because no one's going to say, I don't want to work with him. He's too honest or has too much integrity, right? So that's my test of, is a core value a good core value or not? But then you've got, once you're on the bus, you got the right seat. So if someone buys into the vision and they are on the right bus, then you may have someone who's not in the best seat, or you may have roles and responsibility in that seat that may have to be moved to another seat, right? So when you think about the accountability chart, it's what are the core functions, and then you have 6 to 8 roles and responsibilities for each of those functions. And what I've experienced in that scenario before, so we have someone who someone has to own this seat, and it happens to be this person. And from a GWC perspective, you look at those responsibilities, and there's one or two that either they don't want, or don't have the capacity to do. But the rest of the seat, they're doing good for today, right? There again, you're committing to the leadership team, but you're reevaluating this every 90 days, and then you're doing annual planning once a year. So there's 4 times a year to look at the accountability chart and say, do we have the right people in the right seat? But sometimes it is like you're in the right seat for now, but we got to move some of these roles to another seat, or we got to carve that out to a totally different function. But from an objectivity perspective, everyone understands what we're trying to do, you know, how we're going to do it, why we're doing it. And so it shouldn't be a surprise and come as like in a quarterly meeting where it's like, hey, you're no longer fit for this seat, right? That should have been going in being an ongoing conversation to where the leadership team was a part of knowing what the needs of the organization are and are seeing way ahead that this is going to evolve.
Yeah.
And if this is going to evolve, that may mean that I'm going to drop down into, a different seat, but it's the right seat for me that's going to give me energy and I'm going to enjoy my work versus if you give me roles and responsibility that, are not right for me and I'm not good at it, then you're actually going to drain me. You're going to burn me out.
Yeah.
So I think it is there again from a just pure taking the emotional part out of it. There's a lot of logic and objectivity that would go into that decision before that person was ever pulled off that seat. I mean, I'm not even pulled it. It's not an emotion, right? It's a constant refining of the energy of our people to get going in the right direction.
Yeah. My buddy Glenn Grant, who was on, I think, episode 1 of the podcast when he was talking about selling his business, or how to prepare to sell the business. He did some consulting for Self-Assembled Ventures was his business, and one of the things he did was he was working with the smaller end of the range of EOS. He was an EOS implementer, but he called it for smaller businesses. He called it the execution team. Like, this is what we need to execute
Yes.
the
Yes.
business, not
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
leadership team. So people didn't
Yeah.
get accustomed to being called the senior leader of the business. They were part of the
Yes.
execution team.
No, I like that. I haven't heard that, but consider that idea stolen.
Yeah. Send the royalty to Glenn.
Yeah.
All right. So tell me about Wonder and what you really do there.
Yeah, so Wonder is a marketing, media, and technology agency, and we, um, having the opportunity post COVID, new world, kind of starting over from building an agency and spending years going, if I ever do it again, I'll do it differently. What we've done is build a very experienced team. So my leadership team, my original co-founder is Mark. He's managed over $500 million in paid media. So he came from the bigger agency called Publicis. So he was a ecom guy that went to an agency that got bought by a medium agency that got bought by a bigger agency and ended up as a director of analytics at Publicis. So tons of experience. I'm a media SEO lead gen nerd, a lot of MarTech backgrounds, a lot of CRM, website development, that's large enterprise web development. And then Warren, my integrator, actually I owned an agency for a decade. He ran about a $50 million agency. He was the managing director of a large in-house agency for a sales company. And then Andy, my VP of accounts, was the president of an agency for 13 years. So we built the leadership team with a ton of experience. And then we have been very blessed to hire great creative talent and great account people and project managers. And then we have a really strong bench of freelance talent. One, because the agency model works that way now. Two, because there was a period of time between me starting this and leaving, doing my consulting work, where I recruited for agencies. So I had a period of about 18 or 24 months where I was doing recruiting to help agencies find talent. That's how I found my co-founder. And then during that time, I worked with 30 agencies. I had 10 of those that ultimately ended up hiring us to do white label media for Wonder. So Wonder was an agency behind the scenes that Mark and I had met Mark, and he wanted to do something independent, not be a part of a big agency anymore. So we started doing media for other agencies, and had 10 clients doing that. And then after that, when I was doing the recruiting, and then we started white label, and I was still stiff arming starting an agency, that we were doing our quarterly, and it's like, hey, next year, what doors do we want to knock on? Do I want to knock on recruiting? Do I want to knock on white label services? Or do we just want to go get our own clients finally? And we just said, we're going to get our own clients. So that was when he and I came together. I started shutting the recruiting down. We recruited Warren, got EOS on day one, and then started building Wonder from there. But it was from the beginning a very experienced team. We work primarily with clients that run on EOS, mostly in the B2B tech space. We, over 20 and 25 years, I created a lot of frameworks that once I discovered EOS and saw what a framework actually could do, we just package those up. We call it the Next 90 Marketing Operating System. And what we do with clients is, with all clients, large or small, project or retained, we start with two things, what we call first 90 insights. So we have a proprietary process for 90 days. And then we start with marketing continuation, which is we're going to meet you where you are. If you've got needs, you got a trade show, you got media, you got stuff, we're going to pick that stuff up and start working. But, for myself, changing jobs on the corporate side, leaving one company and going to be a VP of marketing for a technology company, it took me 6 to 9 months, even though I knew the industry, I knew what they did. As to get into a marketing leadership role takes time to be effective. And so that's one of the things I tell prospects is, how long would you expect it would take a VP of marketing to be up to speed and fully contributing? They're like 6 to 9 months. And I'm like, and you give agencies 6 to 9 days. It's like, so we're going to do this 90-day thing that we do that helps us get entrenched in your business really quick. We're going to get to work doing the things that you need. But by day 90, you're going to have a 1 year plan. And that 1 year plan is going to be anchored in the 3 year picture of your sales and marketing alignment. And then we're going to execute that plan on 90-day cycles. So there's more to it than that, but that's the general framework that we use. And it takes the reactionary component out with both the clients themselves too, because you now have sales and marketing in conversation, and you have marketing leading where we're headed to support sales versus sales always pulling marketing where they want them to go.
Yeah.
So, and in mostly the B2B space, those are the common challenges that we see. But anyway, so that's our approach. We work with non-EOS clients as well, but we still use the same approach.
I know EOS is really prevalent. I remember when it was first getting rolled out, maybe 15 years ago or something, but it's really prevalent. I'm curious, of all the leads you talk to in the B2B tech space, what percentage of them are on EOS?
So it's funny. We had an inbound lead come in yesterday. And I hopped on the call at 3 o'clock today, and I was like, "Hey, we had the conversation, and I was like, how'd you find us?" He was like, "Actually, I have a whole Gemini thread." He was like, "I was just querying Gemini on what types of companies do what and who's out there that understands sales marketing and EOS, and y'all came up." The One of our first clients when we were actually launching Wonder was someone that I had been speaking to. I used to work with. We're talking to her over the course of a year. It's another thing that we help clients do is understand their buyer journey. Because even as we bring on clients and they understand the journey of them hiring us and the timeline, that's a good reflection of now let's talk about your clients and what that looks like. But we talked for a year, and then we finally had the call where they got their Series A funding, and she said, "We're ready to go. This is what I need." And I said, "Well, with that, let's walk through all that." It's like, we have an approach. Are you familiar with the entrepreneurial operating system? She goes, "Oh, we run on EOS." So like the initial conversation was a perfect fit. There's 300,000 companies estimated to be running on EOS right now. So it's very popular because we're in the EOS ecosystem too. I have a podcast called Inside the 90. And I guess so because I'm in that ecosystem, it's much more common to have those conversations with companies who already run on EOS, who know that's what we do.
Yeah.
But I would say 80% of the time or more that I'm speaking with someone that fits that profile, they are familiar with, have read the book, are self-implementing, or are running with or working with an implementer.
Do you ever actually sit in a seat in the accountability chart?
So we do. We actually have a service called the Marketing Seat.
Okay.
But that was actually the lead that came in today. That's what he was looking for. It depends on capacity, right, and the time, because it's going to be a leadership seat. So either myself or Andy that runs our accounts. He ran an agency for 13 years where they ran on EOS as well. And then we have some individual contractors that understand EOS that will work with us that we would place if it was fractional. But yes, we do that as a service. It's more of a we're not it's not we don't have someone like that every month always retained where we're doing that, but we can hop in and fill that seat for a period of time, and then even help. I mean, with the recruiting background, help people understand what the needs are, so that then they can go, find the right person to sit in that seat.
Hmm, cool. So when you were growing, where'd you grow up?
Yeah, I am standing right where I grew up in a place most people have never heard of called Greenville, South Carolina.
Hmm.
That's until it made like the top list of everything. So now it's the best place to live, the best place to work, the best, it's made the top list everywhere in the past decade.
Hmm.
So growing up, no one had ever heard of Greenville. Now it's an amazing place. It's a very thriving community with a really strong entrepreneurial
Hmm.
and agency
I had a
community.
colleague's fraternity brother, I believe, was from Greenville. Mike Fletcher, Michael Fletcher played baseball. He played baseball at Duke?
Um, I know an Amy Fletcher, and I think she's married to a Mike Fletcher. Not sure if it's the same one
Huh,
or not.
interesting.
Yeah. But yeah, interesting thing about Greenville, South Carolina, it was the first city outside of New York or Chicago to have an Ad Age Agency of the Year. So in 1981, Henderson Advertising was Ad Age Agency of the Year. If you remember the Dow brands scrubbing bubbles, the bubbles going down the drain.
Okay, okay, yeah, yeah.
um, but yeah, so Greenville has had is just a legacy of great ad agencies for 45 years now. So it's a really cool. There's a bunch of small agencies now.
Huh.
There always has been, but it's a really good town. It's a great city, great vibe. Obviously, great climate now, and since COVID, just South Carolina has become one of the leading states for in-migration trends. But it's always been a cool town. It's great for agencies and entrepreneurs.
So when you were growing up, do you think you'd be running your own business, and did you think that would be a marketing agency?
So oddly enough, I mean, it's kind of a funny way to close the conversation because it's where it all started. But I both my parents own their own business. My dad's 82 and still owns a business that he runs. And my brother is fourth generation now. My brother, my nephew, work in that business. And
Does it run on EOS? Is the question.
I, we are actually in a transition. We're in the succession planning where I am being brought in, and I am slowly bringing some of these things in to my nephew, who will be the heir of the business. So it will be there. But my mom owned an interior design firm, so she was professional services creative and did all that. So I just grew up in that. And when I was in high school, Greenville has what's called the Fine Arts Center, which is a fine arts high school. And I drew my whole life. I was a doodler. I'm not a, I think ADD is over prescribed. I wasn't hyperactive, but I'm just a creative thinker, so the classroom was never my gift, but I was always drawing. So I got to go to an arts high school my junior and senior year. And I was in a graphic design class, and my teacher said, early in the semester, he's like, "What do you like to draw or paint?" And I'm like, "Whatever someone tells me to." And he's like, "Oh, you definitely need to go into graphic design. Like, you need projects assigned to you. You don't need to be a fine artist." And that conversation, which was probably 90 seconds, put me on a path to go to Winthrop University to get a BFA. When I went to college, I said, "I'm going to go to college, get out, work in advertising for 5 years, and start my own agency." So that was the plan. I didn't make it 5 years. I started my own agency after 3 years when I was 26. And I look back now, you know, you I had a very blessed childhood growing up, and I but the idea of having a job was never it just never crossed my mind. I mean, I was like, I'm just going to go start and do something. And so I think that even goes back to my father's probably pretty high visionary. And, I think I have that same streak. And only really until last month, I was reading the new book, from Mark C. Winters called Visionary.
Hmm.
And when you read that opening, the introductory paragraph, and he's talking about how you just have this drive to do something, and that visionary is not an ego label. It's a responsibility. Like, if you're going to go start something, you have a responsibility to tell people where this is going, You have a responsibility to let your employees know why you're doing it. And, so that everyone can decide to buy in. And I think I've just always had that drive to go build something. But I've always also balanced that with this, like, even the visionary term. Like, I've never labeled myself as the visionary. I think when EOS came along, I was like, okay, I'm playing the visionary role. But recently now I'm embracing that. I was like, it is my job to cast the vision and get people to buy in and lead this team this direction.
Cool. And so, were there any great, interesting stories in your winding career journey that you feel sharing?
Yes. So what we've left out is I started an agency really young at 26. I worked for an agency that's pretty nationally known. They're now called Brains, but it was Brains on Fire back in the 90s. Brains Co. They're a great, an awesome creative shop. And left to start my own thing. Actually hit success fairly early. So we ended up getting a project from a company called TTI that had this brand of power tools called Ryobi, and they wanted to do this thing with Home Depot. And so we actually got the project to rebrand Ryobi power tools and pitch it to Home Depot with a new product that was the first ever power tool combo kit.
Hmm.
So we literally built the Orange Rack Home Depot inside of TTI's headquarters, and we mocked up full retail displays and everything, designed all the packaging, and it hit, and we just took off, and that was like 2000, 2001 during the dot-com bust. And we just didn't feel a thing. We were growing like crazy. So we got up to about 25 people. Did that. We knew they were going to take that in-house at some point in time. But the challenge with starting an agency is having an 800-pound gorilla. And that was our 800-pound gorilla client. So once they decided to take that in-house, then we shrunk down. And then I had the opportunity to go start another consulting firm with one of our clients. So I, exited that uh, and with a very graceful partner. Like, we're still best friends. So he allowed me to walk away and get off leases and all that. We had contracts and all that, and wasn't a big payday for me or anything. It was more like, how can I go do this and let him remain stable? And then that consulting company led to me starting another agency. Just because we were doing the consulting and those clients were like, hey, will you do the work? We were doing a lot in the destination real estate market back then. We had the power tool side of the business, but we had tons of real estate clients. And 2001 to 2008, it was booming. By 2008, I built another agency. We had 18 employees. We had signed the paperwork to acquire my old agency with my best friend. He was coming on. That was Labor Day weekend. I had to come to him of 2008 and say, hey, we can't do this. We just have a client that went bankrupt. And so first real estate client went under in August of 08. That was Labor Day weekend when I told him that. And then we had another client in the Bahamas who said, hey, our funding's getting held up. And then now the title of my autobiography will be, at least we have Lehman Brothers. So our largest client, our 800-pound gorilla, was Lehman Brothers. So on September 12th of 2008, that was the third domino to fall for us. And our whole industry was shot dead between the eyes. So we basically went from 18 people acquiring another agency to laying off, I think, 12 within 2 weeks, getting down to a team of 6, 7, or 8. By the end of the year, through some attrition and having, we really started 09 with about 5 people. That was, I never experienced the Great Depression, and neither did any of my parents. But as far as what felt like the Great Depression, like 09 was brutal. So we tried to survive and pivot. And then at the end of 09, that's when someone reached out to me on the corporate side and said, we've got this, this web MarTech role. And it was someone I went to college with, and they knew that I always had a bent for systems and stuff. You would be great at it. And so that was kind of my Jesus take the wheel moment, where I took a paycheck and at January of 2010, and we shut everything down. And I was like, all right, I'm done. Now I'm just going to be a corporate guy. So that's a big speed bump in the journey that was, I wouldn't trade. I'll put it that way. A lot of learnings, a lot of humility, but it also put a lot of fear in me. Which was another reason not starting the agency, because I did want an 800-pound gorilla. I didn't want to get in that situation again. So with EOS and with a lot of history, we're just trying to do it all differently to where we don't have that same risk again.
Right, right. Cool. Well, Jamie, I really appreciate everything you've shared and the great discussion we've had today. If folks want to reach out to you to connect, understand how you might be able to help them, or just talk to you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, so you can find me on LinkedIn. It's Jami Mullikin. Or you can go to workwithwonder.com. You can find us there and see the work that we're doing and what our approach is. And I'm always happy to connect. So grateful for this opportunity, Cal. I, enjoy podcasting. You can find me on InsideThe90.com. That's our podcast that I do with my implementer. So he's an EOS implementer, and we just spend so much time talking about business together, coming from similar backgrounds, that we do the podcast, and I'm the marketing seat and he's the sales seat. So you can find me there too.
Awesome. Is there anything else you want to cover before we wrap up this episode?
Now, I think empowering healthy business, the name of the podcast, if you haven't read Traction, go read it, because vision, traction, and healthy is what EOS provides you. And then just my word of advice is entrepreneurship is hard, and there's a lot of risk, there's a lot of reward. But if you read any entrepreneurial autobiography or biography, it's perseverance, right? It's surrounding yourself with community, being vulnerable, letting people help, and just know that it's a rocky road at times, but there's a lot of reward in it.
Very true. Well, thank you so much, Jamie, for making this another exciting episode of the Empowering Healthy Business podcast.
All right. Well, thank you, Cal. See you.
Another episode in the books. Thank you so much for tuning in. For show notes and more, visit empoweringhealthybusiness.com. If you would like to have a one-on-one discussion with me, or possibly engage SmartBooks to help with your business, you can reach me at C-A-L, at empoweringhealthybusiness.com, or message me on LinkedIn, where I am easy to find. Until next time, this is Empowering Healthy Business, the podcast for business owners, signing off.